The morning light slides softly through the window. Evelyn sits at her kitchen table, a cup of tea warming her hands. Outside, the birds are awake, but her shoulders feel heavy, still asleep. She lifts her arm, slow and careful, feeling the quiet resistance in every muscle. At 62, she thought she had learned to live with the stiffness. But this morning feels different. The air is calm, her heart steady, and she decides to listen to her body's quiet voice. Years of painting, lifting, working, and carrying have left their marks. Each brushstroke, each box, each moment of care added a small weight to her frame. Now her shoulders carry stories, not just strain. She takes a deep breath, and something inside her shifts. It isn't pain this time. It's awareness. The kind that whispers, "You can move again." She closes her eyes and imagines her joints softening, her muscles melting like snow in the sun. Her breath deepens, her body follows. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn feels ready to start again. Not fast, not strong, but slow. And sometimes, slow is exactly what healing sounds like. The weight we carry is not always seen. Sometimes it rests quietly on our shoulders, tucked between the bones and breath. For Evelyn, it began years ago. Not in one moment, but through countless small ones stitched together by time. Carrying groceries up the stairs. Lifting her grandchildren into her arms. Reaching for paintbrushes on high shelves. Sitting too long at her desk, forgetting to move, to stretch, to release. Each action seemed harmless, but the body remembers everything. Every tiny strain left a fingerprint of tension, a silent echo under her skin. At first it was only tightness, a whisper. But whispers can grow loud when we don't listen. The pain began to visit more often, staying longer, settling in. Evelyn learned to adjust the way she moved, hiding the ache from others. She smiled when people asked how she was, and said she was fine. Inside, her shoulders felt like they carried invisible stones. Not just the stones of work and age, but of responsibility and worry. Years of doing for others, years of forgetting her own body's needs. It's strange how the shoulders, built for strength, become a place for burden. They hold our posture, our pride, our persistence. But they also hold our tension, our fatigue, our silence. Evelyn sometimes thought of them as shelves, storing everything she never put down. The late nights, the unfinished projects, the unspoken fears. She didn't mean to ignore them. Life simply moved faster than her awareness could follow. And as she aged, the space for ignoring grew smaller. The stiffness spread, like a shadow following her everywhere. She stopped painting for long hours because the brush felt heavier. She began to notice how even a hug or a wave could bring discomfort. Still, she told herself it was normal, that it was just age. But in quiet moments when the house was still, she would feel the weight again. A pressure pressing from inside out, asking for attention, not pity. The body speaks in sensations when words are ignored. It whispers through soreness, sighs through stiffness, pleads through fatigue. And Evelyn was finally starting to hear it. She realized the pain was not punishment, but a message. It was her body's way of saying, "You've carried too much for too long." The host's voice softens, inviting listeners to reflect. How much are you carrying right now? Not in your hands, but in your shoulders, your chest, your breath. The years of holding things in, emotions, expectations, endless doing. The body keeps score, quietly and faithfully. And yet it also forgives if we let it. Evelyn didn't know it yet, but that forgiveness was already waiting. It was waiting in the slow stretch of morning light. In the first breath she took without rushing. In the small decision to notice the ache instead of resisting it. Sometimes healing begins not with movement, but with awareness. The moment we finally feel the weight we carry is the same moment we begin to let it go. It happened one quiet evening. The air was cool, and the house hummed with stillness. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, reaching for a cup on the top shelf. Her fingers brushed the handle, but before she could grasp it, a sharp pain shot through her shoulder. It wasn't new, but this time it felt deeper, more insistent. She froze, her breath caught somewhere between surprise and surrender. For a moment, she thought of calling someone for help, but then she simply stood there, listening. The pain throbbed like a heartbeat, steady, honest, impossible to ignore. And for the first time, Evelyn didn't rush to push it away. She leaned on the counter, eyes closed, and let her breath find its rhythm again. She realized her body wasn't betraying her, it was trying to speak. It had been whispering for years, through small aches, stiffness, and fatigue. But she, like many of us, had turned the volume down. She had told herself to keep moving, to be strong, to endure. Now the message was clear. It was time to listen. She moved her hand slowly, testing the limits of motion, feeling where it stopped. There was resistance, but also a strange gentleness. It was as if her body was saying, "This is where I hurt, and this is where you can begin." Evelyn took a deep breath, the kind that fills the chest and softens the ribs. She exhaled, letting her shoulders drop, and with that breath came a small wave of calm. The pain was still there, but her fear began to fade. She realized awareness isn't about fighting pain, it's about understanding it. Every sensation, every twinge is a map, a story drawn beneath the skin. The host's voice lingers in the air, soft and reflective. How often do we move without noticing our own bodies? How often do we treat pain like an enemy instead of a teacher? Evelyn's realization that night changed something subtle within her. She began to pay attention to how she reached, how she stood, how she breathed. She noticed that her shoulders lifted when she was anxious, that she held her breath when she focused too hard, that even her thoughts could tighten her muscles without a single movement. Awareness became her new kind of medicine. It didn't come in a bottle or a treatment plan. It came in the form of presence, a soft return to the body she had ignored. Over the next few days, she didn't force herself to stretch or exercise. She simply observed. She sat by the window and watched how the sunlight touched her skin. She noticed how her shoulders softened when she smiled. Awareness gave her space, and that space was the beginning of healing. In that stillness, she found something beautiful, a sense of compassion for herself. The kind that says, "You've done enough, you can rest now." And from that rest, the real movement was about to begin. The next morning arrived softly. The light outside was pale and kind, the kind that doesn't rush the day. Evelyn sat by her window again, the same chair, the same cup of tea. But something inside her was different. She felt ready not to fix but to begin. She placed her hands gently on her lap, letting her shoulders settle where they wanted. No forcing, no correcting, just noticing. The air felt cool on her skin, a reminder that she was alive, present here. She rolled her shoulders forward in tiny circles, barely moving. At first it felt strange, almost hesitant. Her muscles were tight, unfamiliar with such slow kindness. But she continued, letting the motion grow only as far as comfort allowed. She imagined her joints waking up, stretching after a long sleep. Each circle felt like a whisper of renewal. She inhaled deeply through her nose and exhaled through her mouth. The breath moved through her body like a tide, gentle and steady. With every exhale, she felt a small piece of tension slide away. The host's voice guides softly, as if speaking to every listener. "Move slowly," it says. "Your body already knows what it needs." Evelyn smiles faintly, letting that thought sink in. She lifts her shoulders up toward her ears, holds for a moment, then releases. The drop feels like relief, like letting go of an invisible weight. Her breath follows the rhythm, rise, hold, release. It becomes a quiet dance, one that no one can see but she can feel. The pain doesn't disappear, but it softens, loses its sharpness. It becomes part of the movement instead of stopping it. She closes her eyes and lets the warmth of the sun touch her face. The world outside hums with life, yet inside everything slows down. It's not about stretching far or proving strength. It's about finding peace inside the motion, grace in the slowness. Her hands lift slightly, elbows floating outward. The muscles around her shoulders loosen, and a tiny sigh escapes her lips. That sigh carries more than air. It carries years of tension leaving quietly. Evelyn laughs softly, surprised at how good the stillness feels. It's a quiet joy, a rediscovery of her own body's rhythm. She remembers how she used to rush everything, even rest. Now, every breath feels like an act of patience. The narrator pauses, as if smiling through the microphone. Sometimes healing isn't about doing more, the voice says. It's about doing less, but with intention. Evelyn nods, eyes still closed, breath still steady. She feels her body respond, grateful and gentle. Each slow roll, each deep breath, builds a bridge back to herself. When she finally opens her eyes, the world looks softer, calmer. And in that quiet morning light, she realizes something simple and true. She doesn't have to move fast to move forward. Healing, she thinks, begins exactly here, slow, patient, and real. Days began to follow a new rhythm. Each morning before the world asked anything of her, Evelyn stretched. Not out of duty, but out of quiet devotion. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost sacred. She rolled her shoulders forward and back, feeling the warmth grow beneath her skin. The motion no longer felt mechanical, it felt alive. She could sense the blood flowing, the tension melting, the breath guiding her gently. The window light became her companion, steady and patient. She would lift her arms slowly, reaching toward the ceiling, then let them fall like soft rain. Some mornings her body resisted, stiff and unwilling. But she learned to greet that stiffness like an old friend. She whispered to herself, "It's okay, we'll move together." That simple kindness made every stretch lighter. She added small movements each day, gentle neck turns, slow arm circles, tender shoulder lifts. Each motion carried intention, not pressure. It was no longer about fixing pain, but about creating connection. She began to feel her body as a living story again, one that had been paused, not lost. And every stretch turned a page. The host's voice blends softly with the rhythm of her breathing. "You don't have to chase youth," it says. "You only have to meet yourself where you are." Evelyn smiles. For the first time, she doesn't compare her body to what it once was. She honors what it is now, capable, resilient, present. The more she moved, the more she noticed the subtle magic in repetition. What felt impossible yesterday felt natural today. Her shoulders no longer felt like armor, but like wings rediscovering motion. She even began humming softly during her stretches. Music, movement, and breath flowed together like a single conversation. Her body answered in warmth and gratitude. She realized that healing wasn't something happening to her. It was something happening with her. Her patience became her strength. Each slow circle, each deep breath was a quiet declaration, "I am here." The pain softened into memory, replaced by a calm awareness of balance. Evelyn found herself moving differently through the day. When she reached for her cup, her arm lifted with ease. When she painted again, her strokes felt freer, lighter, almost joyful. Even her posture changed, not forced but graceful. Her body remembered how to move without resistance. And in that rediscovery, she found joy. The kind of joy that doesn't come from perfection, but from peace. The narrator's tone deepens, wrapping the listener in calm reflection. Every stretch, it says, is an invitation. An invitation to inhabit the body you live in, not the one you wish for. Evelyn feels this truth settle gently inside her. The slow movements have become her morning ritual, her quiet conversation with life. And as the days pass, she learns that small, mindful motions can awaken something vast, the simple grace of being alive. Weeks turned into months, and Evelyn's mornings felt lighter. What began as a few careful stretches had become something deeper. Her shoulders no longer spoke in sharp reminders, but in soft murmurs of release. She noticed how her body seemed to breathe even when she wasn't thinking about it. Each slow motion had become an act of trust, her body trusting her again, her mind trusting her body. She no longer chased the absence of pain. Instead, she sought presence, the quiet feeling of being whole. Her reflection in the mirror looked the same, yet everything about her felt new. The tension that once shaped her posture had melted into gentleness. When she moved, there was no resistance, only rhythm. Her shoulders had learned to let go, but so had her heart. She began sleeping better, waking with energy she hadn't felt in years. Even her thoughts seemed softer, less tangled, less heavy. It was as though her body and mind had been waiting for each other to slow down. The host's voice returns, steady and calm, weaving her story into a larger truth. When we move with kindness, it says, our bodies remember how to heal. Evelyn had begun to understand that healing wasn't about youth or strength. It was about harmony, the kind that comes when the body feels safe again. Each gentle roll of her shoulder whispered reassurance to her nervous system. Each deep breath reminded her that calm could live inside motion. Her days began to fill with small, sacred pauses. She'd stop while cooking, rest her hands on the counter and stretch. She'd breathe slowly, listening to the quiet sound of release in her joints. It wasn't exercise anymore, it was communion. The moments she once filled with worry had turned into moments of peace. Sometimes she'd smile without reason, feeling a warm pulse of gratitude rise inside. It amazed her how something so simple could change so much. She realized that slow movement wasn't only about the shoulders. It was about teaching her entire being to relax, to trust, to soften. The tightness in her neck, the tension in her jaw, even the weight behind her eyes all began to fade. Her body no longer felt like a burden she carried, but a companion she cared for. Evelyn found herself thinking about time differently too. There was no rush anymore, no need to prove anything. Healing had no finish line, only moments breath by breath, day by day. She began ending her stretches with a small ritual. A hand over her heart. A whisper to herself, "Thank you for staying with me." The host's voice lowers into a gentle pause. Sometimes it says, "The most powerful transformation is the quietest one." Evelyn nods, her eyes glistening with calm understanding. Her body feels open, her spirit unburdened. The pain had not simply vanished, it had transformed into awareness. And that awareness had turned into peace, one slow breath at a time. Evelyn's mornings became something her neighbors began to notice. They would see her by the window, arms lifting slowly in the soft light. Sometimes the curtains stayed open, and her gentle rhythm drew quiet smiles. Her movements looked peaceful, almost like a slow dance with the morning air. One day, her friend Marjorie stopped by for tea and watched her stretch. "What are you doing?" she asked with a laugh. "You look like a tree moving in the breeze." Evelyn smiled, lowering her arms gently. "I'm just learning to move kindly again," she said. "It helps more than you'd think." Marjorie joined her the next morning, curious but hesitant. They moved together, following the same quiet rhythm. At first there was giggling, small missteps and gentle teasing. But soon laughter turned into stillness, and stillness turned into calm. They both began to feel something beautiful, a shared quiet. Word spread through their small community. A few more neighbors joined, bringing mats, chairs, and curious smiles. No one talked much during the stretches. There was no instructor, no perfection, no rush. Just movement, breath, and togetherness. The air would fill with the sound of steady breathing and the faint rustle of fabric. Even those who couldn't lift their arms fully found comfort in trying. Evelyn realized that healing can be contagious, like kindness passed hand to hand. Every person brought their own story, a stiff neck, a sore back, a heavy heart. And somehow through these small movements, everyone felt lighter. The host's voice drifts softly over the sound of imagined morning birds. When we move together, it says, we remind each other that we are not alone. Evelyn began to look forward to those mornings, not just for the stretches, but for the laughter, the warmth, the quiet connection between strangers. Her shoulders no longer felt like weights but like bridges, linking her to others. Each session ended the same way. A deep breath, a smile, a moment of silence. Then someone would whisper, "Thank you," and everyone would echo it softly. Over time, those two words became their ritual, their shared meditation. It was never about perfect posture or flexibility. It was about showing up for themselves and for each other. Evelyn began to paint again, inspired by these mornings. Her new works were softer, filled with color and light. She painted people stretching, breathing, smiling together. When her friends saw the paintings, they laughed and said, "That's us." She nodded. "Yes," she said, "that's all of us learning to let go." The host's voice fades into a whisper of reflection. Healing, it says, doesn't end with one person. It ripples outward through hands, hearts, and quiet mornings. Evelyn looks around at her small circle of friends. The sunlight touches their faces, and she feels gratitude fill her chest. Her shoulders rest easily, her breath steady, her smile unshaken. In the gentle rhythm of shared movement, she finally understands. Healing was never meant to be done alone. The morning sun spills softly through the window once more. Evelyn stands by the glass, her reflection calm, her breath deep and steady. Her shoulders move with quiet ease, no longer burdened, no longer guarded. Outside, the world hums birds, footsteps, the gentle pulse of life. She smiles, remembering the first time her arms trembled in pain. Now they lift with grace, carrying not weight but freedom. She knows the journey was never about speed or strength. It was about softness, the courage to slow down and listen. Each stretch, each breath, became a small prayer for peace. And now that peace lives inside her, steady as her heartbeat. The host's voice fades in like a whisper of wind. Take one last deep breath, it says. Feel the space in your shoulders, it's yours again. Evelyn closes her eyes and breathes, slow and full. When she exhales, it feels like letting go of years. Her body feels light, her spirit open, her heart quiet. The day awaits, and she is ready to meet it, one gentle motion at a time. Healing, she thinks, doesn't need to hurry. Sometimes it just needs to arrive slowly, like morning light.